to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your mid career professional podcast. I'm one of your co hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me is my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing there today?
I'm doing pretty good, Dr. Dave.
Most excellent. We'd like to welcome all of our viewer and listeners back to another episode. For this is your first time, we hope you. Our goal is for you to get something out of it, and if you're returning, please we appreciate your support and continued effort in helping us, keep this podcast alive and going. So, with that, we're going to introduce today's topic, which is unlocking your potential with the right mindset. So, I'm going to toss that over to Dr. Joe and let him tell us. I'm not going to let him, he's going to tell us what his thoughts are on unlocking your potential with the right mindset.
You know, before my journey back, it seems so long ago now, back in 2020 or 2005. Yeah, when this journey all started for me, I would have never imagined that my mindset was locked or that I wasn't reaching my potential by not having an open mindset. So that was again a shock to me at that time, but I wasn't thinking in terms of growing or developing. So that's probably normal that I didn't see any potential. I didn't see any reason for unlocking my mindset or that my mind was even locked. So I think, as we start to think about what our future looks like, what growth looks like, what development looks like, I think we're going to continuously be in that mindset of everything is the way it is. And I don't have to change. I don't need to change. It's not until something sparks that interest, something changes that mindset to where you start to look at things differently. And that's when it all happened for me when I took that first class in school, maybe not the first, but maybe the second, third, I started to think, wow, this is pretty cool. I'm learning things. My mind is open to, absorb more and, take in more, learn more. And I think that was the first time that I recognized that I had the potential to do more because I started opening my mind to the possibilities. So I think it starts with, understanding that you do have a closed mindset or you're not thinking beyond day to day or what's directly in front of you. And until you do that, then I think you're going to lock your potential. You're going to hide your potential until you recognize that you are capable of doing more things.
Yeah, Joe, I agree with you on so many levels. And I was thinking, when did I start unlocking my mindset? And part of that can go back into the my early military days when I was like, well, I'm military police. This is just the job. And it wasn't until I was challenged then to say, hey, you need to go above and beyond. And then I went above and beyond. And it's like, okay, what do I need to do now? What do I need to do now? But I was still locked in that. And it's not a bad thing. It was just a chapter of my life in that military police or that law enforcement mindset. And it wasn't until I was forced to take on a new responsibility after I got out of the military. And what does that look like? Where's my potential there? I just completed my bachelor's degree, and I didn't know anything else aside from military and civilian law enforcement.
Right.
And I went into retail management, and that opened my mindset in a different level just for the sheer speed of things. Because we're high speed low drag in the military, but in a different way. This is with so much product around you that's floating around, where our stuff was nice and neatly packed usually. And then beyond that, you know where did my mindset really shift? And I'd have to think about that. I think it was probably not even after my master's degree, because I was already locked into, okay, I'm going to corporate America. I've started in
Right.
retail. I'm going to continue in corporate America. That's the air quotes American dream. And I did that for another, for dozen years.
Right.
And I completed my PhD. And that, I think, is where my potential started unlocking, was during my doctoral program, because it was outside of my comfort zone. Because, like, doctorate program is typically not like an undergraduate or graduate. It's a completely different journey. um, completely different expectations, and it really challenged me to open my mindset a lot more, not just me being a manager or me being, supporting other people in corporate America and helping them develop, but really digging deep into that purpose piece and opening the mindset of what is my purpose, not just for myself, but for others around me. And that's a different mindset from, hey, I have to manage this team. I need to make sure they get their training. This is the broader picture, what the purpose is to actually develop them. And I thought that was, I found that kind of fascinating because it really did change my mindset when my mindset was challenged in my doctoral program. And I know this is very education heavy in this analogy, but it's like you said, there's got to be a catalyst. There's got to be
Right.
something that
Yeah.
happens that forces you to challenge your mindset, your direction. What Why am I going to school? Why am I taking this training? Why am I getting this
Right.
certification? Why am I working for this company in this position? Why not another position within the company? Why not another company? What am I doing in this personal relationship? What is the mindset for this? We see a lot of things about traditional families, going back to traditional families, like the nuclear families.
Right.
One person works, the other person stays at home and raises the kids or whatever. And then, this is kind of a little bit of a tangent. And then in the 90s and 2000s, more in the early 2000s, the dual income, no kids thing was a big thing. Well, what's the potential in that relationship? What is your direction for you as an individual and with a partnership or spouse or, best friend or whatever? So that catalyst doesn't have to be something negative. It just needs to be that aha moment. And it usually
Right.
happens when you least expect it. Someone gives you that nudge on the shoulder or tap on the shoulder and asks you a simple question, and it forces you to pause and think.
Well, you said a lot of things in there, and so I think the one reoccurring thing that I heard was the education piece. Yeah, of course that opens your mind to the possibilities, but the catalyst, something that triggers, hey, I need to think a different way, and I think that's really one of the biggest factors. Because whether it's you go to school or you try a new job or whatever it is something that has force you to really think about what does that look like. And once you start to think about what it looks like, you start to kind of develop a maybe it's this, maybe it's that, which there, you know, in lies why you start to open your mind to the potential is because you start to thinking outside that box, getting out of your
Mm-hmm.
comfort zone. And that's what starts to trigger that okay, I have to be open to be able to do this, to learn that, or to now go down this path. So, you're right. I think you can see it more in the education piece because you are absorbing so much, and like you say, especially at the doctoral level, it just comes at you in waves of information and everything else. But it's to me, I think it's still that because I'm thinking back now, reflecting on my career even when I changed careers, I had to start thinking, okay, I'm not this anymore. So I need to see how this can align with what I'm doing now. And once I started looking at that, then I realized I started to see things differently and I started to, again, reflect on those things that I'd done and then now enhance them to where they work in this environment. So I think the one thing you said is that catalyst piece is the trigger to make you think outside of where you are today and how you're going to get to that next level or that next thing. So it can be in your personal relationship, it can be in your career, but something has to trigger you to think. And but you also have to be willing to see it or to recognize that okay, if I want to do this, then I need to go down this path, or I need to at least look over here. And I think that's what prevents a lot of us from, reaching our potential is because we're not challenged with something else, something out of the ordinary, or something that's, not repetitive for us, or something that's not new. And sometimes it's kind of hard to see that if we're not looking for those things.
Yeah, Joe, I agree 1,000%. And the one thing that you said that just was like a punch in the gut was you have to be uncomfortable with change.
Yeah.
And that's what unlocking your potential is, and what obtaining the right mindset is, because you can be so used to doing things one certain way without realizing that there's 12 other ways that
Right.
are a lot more efficient and easy, or just exposes you to different experiences to build your knowledge base and to unlocking your potential. And I think that's a very important statement you said. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable, challenge yourself to be uncomfortable, because we all know, we've talked about it before, if you're in your lane and on cruise control, you're not growing. Your growth
Right.
happens when you become uncomfortable, when you mess up, when you don't get things right, when you break a glass. Oh, I don't pick up a soapy wet glass in the sink with wet soapy hands. It's not probably not going to stick well. So, it's learning from those mistakes and being uncomfortable that allows you to unlock your potential, to find a different mindset, a right mindset, if you will. Not necessarily the best, but the right mindset. And a lot of times that's different from what it is usually different from what we're used to. And I think that being uncomfortable piece is really where unlocking your potential comes from. Like you said, you have to be
Absolutely.
you have to be allow yourself to be susceptible and vulnerable to that.
Right. Well, and that's, I jokingly said this many times on many previous episodes, the idea that, you know, I'm excited about tomorrow. What's the next chapter? What does all that look like? And again, that's me opening my mind to the possibilities. What does this look like for the future? Again, even when we started this podcast, we didn't have any of that in mind. But now that we've been doing this over 4 years into our fifth year, it's like, where could this lead? What else can we do? We That's why it's continued to grow and develop over the years. It's because we looked at, okay, what's next? What could be? And I think that's the other piece of it. Is you have to really think in terms of something that doesn't exist today, but it could. And so that's how you unlock that potential. Again, everybody, some people have heard my story about wanting to be Dr. J. Of course, I'm not going to be Dr. J in the NBA now, but the idea of, as that kid, thinking I could be Dr. J or like Dr. J, that's why, if we get back to that childlike mentality or a childlike mindset, then the sky's the limit. And that's why I try to live my life that way now, with, that childlike enthusiasm. What's next? What can I expect? What should I expect? Or what can I be? What can I do? And so that's why I look at things that way today. I was having a conversation with kids, a couple of weeks ago, sixth graders, and I asked them, what do they want to be when they grow up? And I said, hey, I'm asking you that, but I'm also asking myself. Even though I'm over 60, I'm still thinking of, okay, what's next for me? My life's not over. Back to that the American dream, or dream of working so many years and then settling off into retirement. Yeah, I plan to retire, but I don't plan to just, go fishing or sit down and watch TV all the time. So I
Right.
still think of what the future looks like.
Yeah, and I think a piece of that right mindset is having a positive mindset and an
Yeah,
open mindset. Like you said, being open to other possibilities and that childlike curiosity. You have to have a positive, optimistic, open perspective, I believe.
yeah,
Because if you're just a negative, yeah, if you have a negative mindset, it's negativeness begets negativeness,
right. Yeah,
and so you have to surround yourself with the right attitude, the right people that have the right mindsets to help you grow if you're kind of stuck in that one place.
right.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, Dr. Joe, and this is where we start bringing in the weekly challenge. So what's the weekly
Yeah.
challenge this week?
So for this week's challenge, we've got identify one area where opening your mindset will help unlock your potential for growth in that area. So think about something that maybe you're hesitant on today, or that you've been on cruise control, like Dave said. But think about it. that one area where if you think beyond that, what's in front of you, how you could unlock your potential in that area. So again, I'll say it again. Identify one area where opening your mindset will help unlock your potential for growth in that area.
Yeah, and good.
I was just going to say, in addition to that, don't forget about our assessments. We've got our free assessments and diagnostics out there, along with the weekly journal. So if you haven't downloaded any of those items, please do so. We think that'll help jumpstart your journey and help you start to, you know, take more action towards you improving or increasing or doing whatever you want to do to assist you in your journey. So don't forget about those free tools.
Yeah, yeah, and we love them. It was fun putting them together
Right.
and working with them, and it's great being able to use that weekly challenge journal to help track your progress. What things have you been working on? What is your
Yep.
progress? And what can you go back on and say, maybe I need to spend a little bit more time on that.
Yep.
So you don't have to bounce back into, you know, was that episode, 111
Right.
or 212? It's just
Right.
you can track the weekly challenges that you want to track, and there's plenty of room in there to review your product, review your progress. And if you run out of room, you can download it again. That's all good,
Yep. Yep.
So with that, what are some of your final thoughts or takeaways for viewers and listeners, Joe?
Again, going back to critical self reflection, really thinking about, okay, where you are today and where you'd like to go. And I think that'll help you start to identify areas where if you look at things differently, you might realize, hey, I have the potential to do that, or I could have the potential to do that if I get in the right mindset. So it really comes down to recognizing that you need to change, that there is a reason for you to change. If you're, again, trying to change careers or trying to improve yourself, even in the same career, what can I do that's going to take me further than where I am today? And so getting in that mindset of, I don't know everything. I need to learn. I need to figure things out. And I guarantee you'll be surprised once you open your mind, that, and in my case, I never want to close my mind again. I never want to go back to that closed minded thinking or that one direction thinking, but
Mm-hmm.
just really keep my mind open to the possibilities. And I think if you do that, that willingness to push out of your comfort zone, you'll start to recognize you had the potential to do other things.
Absolutely, and what a great summary, Joe. Really appreciate it. Um, I'm not going to add anything to that. I feel like it's unnecessary. You're awesome with the final thoughts. So, um, we'd like to thank all of our viewers and listeners for joining us on another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, the Mid Career Professional podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast or any of them, please like, subscribe, and share. The more listeners, the more people can find some assistance or some potential for growth, or maybe changing their mindset a little bit.
Right.
And with that, as always, we want to continue being not so ordinary people.